everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and this time you made me watch The Jungle Book from 2016. This is, of course, the live-action remake of the Disney animated movie, although feels a little bit less like a remake and more like going back to the original source material, but also keeping in mind the couple of big iconic things about the original animated Jungle Book. It feels a little bit less of a straight-up remake of an animated movie into theatrical than some of the other things Disney has done lately, like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Lion King. This was directed by Jon Favreau and is a movie that I heard about a lot when it came out. People telling me, including Eric, how great it was and that I should see it, and I just couldn't get excited about it because I grew up not really caring that much about Jungle Book, and I saw that movie a couple times when I was a kid. It was fine. I liked the music more than I liked anything else in it, but oddly, the stuff that least resonated with me in the animated movie is what most resonated with me in this, and so I'll get into that in just a second. This was requested on Patreon by Clark Whitfield, so thanks a bunch to you. This was originally supposed to be a commentary, and DJ and I weren't able to get together to do that in a timely fashion. This has been in the queue for a good long time, and I wanted to finally go ahead and watch it and talk about it. We might go ahead and do that commentary down the road, but I wanted to make sure it was Clark's turn, and I wanted to make sure that it got up this week. So anyway, I'll go ahead and get into it a little bit. Right away, I'm going to say I'm feeling it. This was definitely worth the watch, and is as good as everybody I've talked to said it was. I've run into anybody that wasn't impressed with this movie, and really impressed mostly with how the flavor of it is really unique and not exactly the same thing as the original. This feels like it absolutely validates its existence in just the first 5 or 10 minutes of it. This is a really serious adaptation of Jungle Book. That is a book that I'm not real familiar with, and I don't know exactly what things it this time around went back to the book and made sure it was more authentic to the source material versus the animated version. The ending is different, so I suspect some things, like and I'll spoil stuff a little bit, but in the original Jungle Book, Mowgli goes back to Man's village at the end, and that doesn't happen in this, which I was kind of surprised by. So there's stuff like that where I was like, oh, now I kind of wish that I knew the original source material a little bit. This is a somewhat darker version, of course, not the darkest version. There are a couple of live-action versions of Jungle Book that I have heard are pretty rough around the edges, but I've not actually watched them because this is, like I said, just a story that never especially appealed to me. When I was a kid, I was not really a man versus nature guy, and the older I get, the more I appreciate those sorts of stories. Younger me would have never liked The Revenant, and I really appreciated that movie when I went and saw it in the theater. So I think maybe some of my enjoyment of this is that I'm older, and a more, I don't know, mature or just different me is appreciating the initial ideas of this. I'm seeing some thematic stuff that I'd never really paid attention to before with Jungle Book, and I think this maybe brings a little bit more to the forefront. The idea of whether or not what man does that comes naturally is actually natural. Men make machines, and to the animals of the jungle, that is unnatural and not the way things are meant to be. They call Mowgli's ability to make small tools, to make like small pieces of technology, even man's ability to make fire and use fire is considered tricks and things that are not supposed to be done in the animal kingdom because they're not things that animals can do, and they're not thought of as natural, but that is a thing, of course, that comes naturally to human beings, and we are resourceful, and we do have opposable thumbs, and we're able to invent things, and so how is it unnatural to make tools to make life easier for ourselves and to be able to make life safer for us and do things that we couldn't otherwise do? And both sides of that are played in this, where it is sometimes really dangerous and bad when Mowgli uses his tricks, and at other times, like with a baby elephant that he saves, it is life-changing and is a really helpful thing for the animals. And so there's kind of this argument throughout it as to oddly, because like some of the themes in this are almost like science fiction in nature, or things that we play with a lot anyway in science fiction, but at the most basic level, where we're talking about like really primitive tools, technology, because anything that you make with your hands, it looks like technology to these animals. But of course, we're not talking about anything modern or futuristic or anything. We're just talking about like making a pulley system, which I have to question whether or not Mowgli, all by himself, not even remembering being raised by man, would be able to do. He seems like a genius when it comes to physics, doing these things all on his own. I wonder if Tarzan ever does that. Does Tarzan ever make like a whole pulley system like Mowgli does here in order to go get honey for Baloo? That struck me as going maybe a little bit too far, but the point stands, where it's like, if at what point is it crossing a line into playing God? Where should we stop the tool making and use just the very basic things that God gave us? But then again, a proverbial God. But then again, if man is able to do it because we have powers that other animals don't, is it still unnatural? Like, you know, some animals are able to run very fast and others aren't. So is it unfair or unnatural for you know, big cats to run fast just because? Like, is it a trick for big cats to run fast if a bear can't run as fast? And I guess the big argument and against that, and the big kind of question is, well, if cats run fast, that doesn't necessarily you know, affect everybody else, I guess, except in that it makes it easier for him to kill people, just like fire does with man. So I mean, it's an interesting question, and it's a thing that I had not really picked up on much looking at this material before. And some of it too, just like in Lion King, and I've not seen the new live-action Lion King, and I'll talk about why here in a little bit, discussing this film, but there's a lot of like rules of the jungle and politics of the jungle, which are really interesting here, and I think this movie maybe gets into a little bit more than the animated film. It's been a lot of years since I've seen that, so I am curious to actually eventually go back to that and see how much of what's here is in that, and I'm just not remembering it. But this, if memory is serving, watches to me like a kind of a different thing. And I mean, like, the broad strokes are all there, but the script is very different, or at least to my recollection. This of the live-action remakes that I've seen so far seems like the most from-the-ground-up rewrite, which is really cool. And this, again, it's been a long time since I've seen the animated movie, but I think I would be more likely to go back to this. And like I said, I was won over by some things that the animated film I don't think ever could have, just because of the nature of what it is. And ironically, some of the same stuff that Lion King does in its animation that I suspect it wouldn't in the live action, which is maybe not fair because I've not seen that. So I'm not saying necessarily that it doesn't. I also have talked to people that say that it didn't get them, it didn't work for them. But what I'm talking about is aesthetics and breathtaking landscapes and stuff. The different kinds of mediums and different kinds of even, of course, filmmaking serve different projects better than others. And here, if we're comparing Jungle Book to Lion King, we have two movies that both take place in the jungle. And one of them, I think, is better served in live action, or maybe if you just, you know, reanimated it, and this would work as well if the emphasis was a little bit more on the breathtaking landscapes and also the danger of the jungle. Because that movie, of course, is about that, but it didn't feel as physical and visceral and as scary to me as it did in this. And I don't mean to say that this movie is like spooky or creepy or hard to look at and that you shouldn't, you know, take your kids to it, but it did feel, you know, sort of like, and this is one of the only things that the thing I'm about to mention got right, but sort of like Star Trek Discovery making space scary again with Star Trek. This made the jungle really come alive for me in a way, again, The Lion King did in the animated version. It's all about how breathtaking and awe-inspiring it is, and how humble it makes the creatures that live in it. and I was really impressed with it for managing that, and the real landscapes I like really sold me on that. And of course, there has gotta be a big blend of real photography and computer animation in this, and obviously that's true with Mowgli and all of the animals, because you've got, and I was told how impressive this was. Nobody overstated this. I don't think you can overstate it. It is. It's amazing. You have one actor in this whole movie that's physically actually there, and everything else is a computer animated special effect, and it's not like Green Lantern, where it feels like, okay, there's a guy there, and it helps that Mowgli doesn't have like a computer-generated body, too, which of course would be stupid, and why would you do that? But we did kind of do that with Ryan Reynolds and Green Lantern, as I'm making that comparison. In that, I felt like you had basically a computer-generated movie, at least when you're out in space and you're doing the space stuff, with basically just Ryan Reynolds' kind of floating head there. And this isn't like that. And even if it was just, okay, like Mowgli, all of him is clearly there in a person, but everything else around him is rendered, and it doesn't really look like he's interacting with anybody. That still, of course, would take me out and be a problem. And it's not like that. And he's got a real rapport and real interesting dynamics and some real chemistry with his computer-generated with the computer-generated players in this, and it feels like these animals, just like in Planet of the Apes, are turning in actual performance with this kid. I never feel like he's not there with the others. There are certain animals that, in my opinion, look more believable than others. Certain things that feel a little bit better integrated. Like, I don't think Bagheera always is great in the face, but I feel like Shere Khan almost always is, and I don't know why that is, but it also didn't really bother me much with this. The inconsistency of that wasn't a huge issue, because what really mattered to me was that when Mowgli was talking to animals and when he's interacting with animals, that I believed it. And for whatever reason, it's hard to describe, it didn't even matter how realistic or really there those animals looked, because that kid sold it so well that as long as he's on screen and he's talking to these animals, and he's in almost every scene, so that helps a lot. He's selling it, and I'm buying it, and there's this fantasy world that I'm sucked into. It's spectacular. Probably the most impressive visual effect for me in just integrating the kid with his surroundings and with another animal actor is when he's riding on Baloo. We do that kind of famous scene from the animated movie, and they're singing Bare Necessities, and he's like splashing in the water and smacking Baloo on the stomach and splashing the water around him. And of course, it's a really nice kind of heartwarming moment for those two as friends and developing this friendship. When at first it looks like Baloo is just using him to get honey, which is funny, and he really is just using him to get honey. But then later, of course, they become friends. And like, you guys probably know the story of Jungle Book, even if you've not seen this movie. But I like that friendship more here than I did in the original. I think some of that is because Baloo felt even a little bit more deceptive than he does in that movie, and when he comes to appreciate this kid and decides that there's more to life than just honey, I appreciated that more. It kind of got me more in a place. But that was just, that looked really cool. That was super impressive. This is an absolute all-star cast. Everybody is really impressively, I keep using that word, but it is. It's just an impressive movie. Everybody's really well cast in this, and I think everybody is perfect for the roles that they're in, even if initially it might sound a little bit counterintuitive. I know a lot of people have talked about this, but I'm really late to the party and finally watching this 3 years after the fact. Scarlett Johansson, man, what a cool pick. I don't know. I don't know how anybody even thought to do that, except for the fact that Favreau had worked with her before. Maybe it was just like, well, there aren't really a lot of girls in this script, and I like Scarlett Johansson, and I think she should come in and voice. And she just did her, and she's good at voiceover performances. Let's get her in here somewhere. And she plays the snake really really sultry, and like, it sounds really sexy, but of course we don't play the snake as sexy. It's just a snake. Like, the snake's gender almost doesn't matter, but there's such a hypnotic quality to her voice as she's doing this really like seductress kind of thing with her voice. It's great. The only complaint I've got there is that she's only in one scene. And I remember Ka in the original, doesn't he work for Shere Khan and has some interaction with him and is in several scenes? Again, it's been a long time since I've watched that, so I could be wrong about that. But man, the one scene she's in, she's fantastic. Ka ends up playing as, of course, kind of just a plot device, because it's kind of the one sort of fantastic element where there's kind of this like mind meld component to the hypnotism with the snake, where in seeing into Ka's eyes, there's a revelation about what happened with Shere Khan and Mowgli's father. That's kind of one, you know, spectacular element in the movie, really, and it plays great. It's awesome. But I want to use that to springboard into whether or not this should have been a musical, and it kind of tries to have its cake and eat it too. And this is maybe my biggest criticism of it. Like, I think the story is obviously the story is the story. It doesn't move away too far from what the original animated Jungle Book is, except that, like I said, the ending is a little bit different, and there's maybe a couple elements here and there that are taken more from the book, as far as I understand it, than from that original film. But it's like I said, the flavor of it is different and is a little bit more. Is a little bit more serious, and I'm questioning whether or not the music should have been here at all. We really only do 2 songs, and it's not a straight-up musical, and it seems to be really fighting itself about how much it wants to be an adaptation of the Disney movie, and how much it just wants to do its own version of the Jungle Book. And it doesn't hurt it. This is so weird. It doesn't really hurt it, except for one issue I've got with the King Louie song, and then the credits, when like they just couldn't help themselves. They had to have Scarlett Johansson record the Ka song, and I wonder if originally it was in there and it was cut, and then they just put it in the credits so we'd get to hear it. And don't get me wrong, I'm really glad we got to hear it because it's awesome. It's wonderful. But I wish this either was a musical or not a musical. And I'm like, it could be more like Mulan, where there's not quite as many songs as in some other Disney movies. I'm talking about the animated Mulan. Obviously, the live action one's not out yet, and that's supposedly not supposed to be musical at all. I'm curious to see if it sort of does what this does, where it cheats a little bit and has like a little bit of a song. When we do Bare Necessities, at first I thought we weren't even going to launch into the whole song, where he's just kind of, because like I said, this is just taking itself more seriously than that, and I might have gotten into weird, tonal issues if suddenly it was like a happy bouncy movie, because it's not that. And so when Baloo starts kind of just humming Bare Necessities to himself, I kind of thought that's all we were gonna get, and I was kind of impressed with the subtlety of that. And then later we have not a montage, but we basically just do a musical number, and we straight up do Bare Necessities, and I'm of two minds about it, because the way it's handled is really good, but it doesn't feel like it quite belongs in this version. And then we get to the King Louie song, and King Louie in this is Christopher Walken, which is a genius choice, and he's really menacing and creepy, and like he's got this voice that's of course really super disarming, but he's scary, and he's like mad with power, and he's kind of like the opposite villain of Shere Khan, where he wants to get man's abilities to make things and to use fire, and Shere Khan is just out for revenge. He's got like a Moby Dick thing with man, because he got hurt by fire, and he's scared of fire, and he doesn't want to feel like he's not on top, and so he just wants to kill man. So there's man, and even worse, he's related to the guy that I killed. And so we've got, this is the thing I do always appreciate about Jungle Book. There's multiple villains, and they're all kind of after different things, and they kind of represent, different, like, scary things in the jungle, different fears of the jungle. And so, but King Louie just suddenly starts breaking into song, and it's handled well, it sounds good, I like it in a Jungle Book that is more of just a straight-up remake of the original, but I was really glad this wasn't that, and it just doesn't quite fit. Like, it's really unsettling and unnerving when King Louis shows up, and there's some really nice tension in that scene, and then just all of a sudden he breaks into ooh, I want to be like you, ooh, and I'm like, I don't know about that, especially because just with the internal logic of this piece, Mowgli doesn't know what music is. He doesn't know what songs are. And in the span of like 48 hours, he hears two different animals singing songs. Maybe the idea is just supposed to be that like the wolves don't have songs because, like Baloo says, all they have is propaganda, which I thought was a great line. And Bill Murray, of course, also tears it up with his role, but also reels it in for Bill Murray. He seems to really get this material and knows what to do with it. But anyway, so, you know, there's that. There's just the fact that it's kind of convenient that he's hearing all this music. But much, much more than that is just that this doesn't feel like the kind of universe where people would break into song. Like, maybe have songs. I'm fine with the Baloo thing, ultimately, even though I'm not sure about tonally, because at that point, they're just singing a song together. They're not, like, breaking out into song. Baloo is teaching him a song. It's sort of like if I was, you know, teaching my kids some REO Speedwagon and we were singing, Time for Me to Fly, you know, in the house. It's like that. But then when you get to King Louis, it feels like the movie is really struggling with, wow, we really want to have Christopher Walken sing this song, but it's not really quite a musical, so what do we do? I guess we'll do part of the song, and then he sings the rest of it in the credits. You know, we'll do part of it. I don't think that quite worked. And the other thing that was weird about it is we keep referring to fire as the red flower. And then because the lyrics of that song refer to fire as fire, it's in the lyric, but at the very beginning of the song, but nobody up to this point has referred to it as fire. So that's kind of weird. It sort of feels like now we're just doing a music video and we need to turn our brains off and forget that we're watching a movie for a minute, and then we'll get back into the movie part in a second. But that's really my big qualm with it. Like I said, the VIP here, the MVP here rather, is obviously the kid that plays Mowgli. He was a new actor. This was like an introducing, and his name is Neil Sethi. Or Sethi rather, and he's done so little work that he doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, and I don't know if he's been in anything else since then, but hopefully if he wants a movie career as he gets older, he gets some roles and he gets to, because he's fantastic, and man, that makes it or breaks it. I don't know how old that kid was, 10, 12, whatever, but that performance has to work, and it does. It's wonderful. You know, this is not an episode 1 kind of situation, and I never really questioned his line deliveries, and he's got the hardest job here, because not only is he the only human being in the movie, not only is he a kid with, like, no acting experience, at least on film, but he's also got to act against a bunch of characters, against a bunch of actors that aren't even there. It's really impressive. And he's got to run around without any shoes on, and I don't know if everything under his feet is CG, but, like, it looks like he's out in the jungle some, and so, like, he's got to do that too. Like, that is a very specific set of qualifications, and I want to look into this guy and see what his background was and how he, in the running, managed this, because, like, he looks perfect, but he's also, like he looks like Mowgli, you know, from that movie, but he's also got to be able to do all the physical stuff. You've got to believe him talking to all these creatures that aren't actually there. That's amazing. Like, that could have killed this entire movie. I really wish we were doing more of these live-action remakes the way we did Jungle Book. This was one of the earlier of them. I've not seen Cinderella, and this was shortly after that, I think. Or was it just before it? I don't even know. But it was. But since then, we've kind of gone with a lot of these more of the direction of banking on nostalgia, tugging at your heartstrings for a thing you haven't, the thing that you maybe saw 20, 30, 40 years ago when it was in the theater, and try to give you sort of that same experience again, but change it up just enough that it sort of validates its existence. And that's led to some really tonally uneven things and weirdly paced things, like I thought Aladdin was. I thought Aladdin was pretty much awful. And but Beauty and the Beast I was impressed with because even though there were some performances I didn't like and some new songs that I thought were atrocious, that movie brought back some stuff from the original source material, just like this seems to have done, and clears up some things in the story logic and fleshes that out a little bit. And it doesn't have exactly the same tone that animated movie did, but this separates itself really as its own piece. And it looks like that's what Mulan is trying to do, and so I'm even more excited about seeing that after this, because I think that's more the direction these things need to be going. Like, the original reason you make these, of course, is for the most part, I'm sure, because, again, as I'm always saying, brand recognition, and there's already a built-in audience. There's already people that love that thing and are going to be too curious to not go see it realized in live action. But that doesn't mean that everything that you have in your stable, even if it's popular, lends itself well to that. I mean, what do I know? They're all performing well, except for maybe Dumbo. I don't know if anybody went and saw that, and I heard terrible things. I've not seen that either. But like Aladdin and Lion King both did huge guns, and they both came out the same year. So clearly audiences are reacting fine to that, and the nostalgia trip is working for them. But man, I wish we could get more artistic and more understated and more inventive like this was, because this feels like it broke new ground to me. Like it did some pretty revolutionary stuff with its special effects and integrating a live-action performance into a mostly CG world, or at least a world populated with CG characters. And I wasn't thinking, oh, these characters are CG the whole time. Like, that wasn't a gimmick. It was, okay, this looks really hard to do. How do we do it in the most effective way possible? And it felt like an art from adversity thing, as opposed to okay, we can throw as much money at this as we want to, and let's just, cobble together something and throw it on screen we know it will sell. Like, this felt like a real artistic endeavor to me in a way some of these haven't. And I want to see more of that kind of thing. And I've been leery of Lion King, especially. I'm going to be even more leery of that. And more curious now, but also more leery. I don't know if I'm ever going to watch that, because Jon Favreau also made it, and it sounds like it made all the mistakes that he didn't make here, at least from the previews and from what folks have told me. Again, I don't want to review a movie that I've not seen, but a lot of the reason I didn't see that is because I didn't see how you could possibly recreate the awe and wonder that you were able to with these really expressive animated characters in a like 2D rendered animated world that was all about, again, the awe and wonder and spectacle of the jungle. And this does it with real photography, or at least dupes me into thinking that some of it that maybe isn't is real photography. And that's a lot harder to do, I would think, with Lion King, because what was so special about that movie was that you had, like, photorealistic landscapes in animation with more cartoony creatures populating it. And so you end up with kind of a backwards thing from this, and it just doesn't feel like a thing that makes a lot of sense to attempt to do in live action. And of course it's not live action, but to, make it look more realistic. I don't know. So you end up with this, like, really weird flip, this really weird opposite thing where you're able to, where at least this version of Jungle Book was able to win me more over with the realistic landscapes, whereas Lion King, I don't want at least the characters populating it to look too realistic. And I don't know how you make that its own thing. Like, what folks have told me anyway is that it is pretty much just that same movie beat for beat, and a lot of the script is the same, and this avoided that. I just don't know how you do it with Lion King. So I'm still really trepidatious about looking at that. But another thing that I really appreciated real quick about this, talking about the script and dialogue and stuff, is that it does not feel like it's pandering to a modern audience. Like, very little of the dialogue is laden with any kind of like current slang or anything. There's a character that says cool, you know, there are a couple things like that, but it's mostly like comedic characters that do that. This has, I don't want to say that the language is Shakespearean, but it's a little bit more old world, and that makes me kind of buy the jungle setting a little bit more, and it's not holding anybody's hands. It's not feeling like it's got to be really modern or people are gonna like tune out and lose it. Like, it feels pretty timeless. There's not really any place in this where I feel like, okay, this is for an audience in 2016, and like you could go back in time and show people this movie and they wouldn't understand. They'd be baffled I even made it because of all the computer effects. But just from a script level, you could go back in time 40 years and show this to anybody, and you could probably show it to anybody 40 years ahead. This is, I'm going to say, even though I liked Beauty and the Beast, I'm going to say that this, of the ones I've seen so far, is the most timeless of them. And again, I'm hoping Mulan is that way as well. But anyway, I really enjoyed this. I will actually definitely go back to this. And it won me over more on Jungle Book, which is, I think, the biggest compliment I could pay it, because I never really cared that much about Jungle Book. And to think that, like, a live action, because this has been tried a lot of times, even in live action, and to think that a live action remake of the animated Disney film would make me like this material more, is not a thing I thought I would be saying. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again to Clark Whitfield for requesting it. If you would like to make me watch something or read something, you can become a $15 patron at patreon.com/Geekvolution and get into the rotation there. And you can do it one time, just get yourself in the queue, or you can stay in the rotation and get a request every few weeks, every 2 or 3 months. And anyway, thanks again for watching, and I will see you again next time.